All research begins with a story. My research begins with the story of how my love for languages and questions about my identity collided.
Hi, my name is Kiana Kishiyama.
When I was a year old, I was adopted from China to Canada. My dad, a second-generation Japanese immigrant, and my mom, a white Canadian, taught me to be proud of my mixed Chinese, Canadian, and Japanese identities. Growing up, I spoke English and French and studied Mandarin and Japanese. I loved learning languages because I felt like it brought me closer to the different cultures that I belong to. Research has shown that language and identity are inseparable. The languages of your heritage can strengthen your sense of identity by affirming your cultural beliefs, values, and traditions. In other words, research shows that when we speak our languages, we're not only telling others who we are, we're telling ourselves who we are. International adoptees, however, have been excluded from this conversation, despite language learning being one of the main cultural activities that adoptees may use to reclaim their cultural identities. Questions and experiences that international adoptees have about identity can be quite isolating because they're not often spoken about or experienced by non-adopted people. If language is so important to our sense of self, how do we include international adoptees in these important conversations about language and identity?
Well, that's where I come in.
My research asks, what are international adoptees' experiences with learning the language of their heritage, and how do these experiences contribute to their sense of identity? I interviewed adult international adoptees currently living in Canada to ask them about their language learning experiences. In the interviews, my positionality as an adoptee enabled us to share stories about what our languages meant to us and the impact that our languages had on our sense of identity. These discussions showed that international adoptees have unique and multifaceted identities, woven together by the threads of both their adoptive families and adopted history. These international adoptees' stories speak of language as belonging, language as reconnecting, and language as the self. These stories have the power to show that language is a central part of who we are. But why does all this matter? There are approximately over 21,000 Canadian international adoptees, each of whom have a right to maintain their cultural identities, strengthen their sense of belonging to their cultural heritage, and build cultural resilience while growing up in Canada. International adoptees' one-of-a-kind stories have the potential to contribute not only to diversity and multiculturalism in Canada, but to the possibilities of adoptee-informed language education, where the identity of adoptees is taken into consideration in language teaching practice. This could look like programs in which adoptees learn about culture and language simultaneously, or language instructors who give learners the opportunity to consider and explore their personal connections to the language. This research not only impacts international adoptees, but anyone who has been denied the opportunity to learn their ancestral language or is looking to reconnect to their heritage through language. We all have rights to our languages and to our cultural identities.